If you're having a hard time dialing in amp tones that you really love using your Helix or HX Stomp or any other modeler for that matter, then this video is for you. So growing up and learning how to play guitar, I always used real amps. Tube amps, 412s, a tuner pedal and a tube screamer for the most part was kind of all I had for a long time. But as my needs changed and I needed to dive into the digital realm, I had a hard time recreating what I was hearing from an amp in real life in the digital world. So as I jumped into playing live and really playing at church, I tried pretty much everything. I did a real amp and cab, an isolated cabinet with mics, a tube amp and a load box, an analog preamp with an IR loader, and finally landed on using an HX Stomp with a full board. So after months of dialing a few things in with an HX Stomp, I was satisfied with the tones I was getting, but I wasn't in love with all of the amp tones all the time. And sometimes it was the amp tones themselves, sometimes it was how it was interacting with drive pedals. There was just always something that didn't always sit right with me, and like I said, I didn't love it. So as I got to using the HX Stomp, I really pretty much landed on using third-party IRs for the most of my patches that I was using. I found that those third-party IRs did a better job of kind of capturing some of the amp feel and tones that I was going for, which made it better. But I did always want to keep things kind of native or in the box with the Line 6 stuff. I will say this, Line 6 has updated a number of times, but the 3.5 cab update made it more feasible for everyone to use all in the box cabs and kind of dish the third-party IRs, which I appreciate. As I was digging through and kind of trying to dial in some of these patches and some of these tones, it finally clicked. What am I trying to reproduce? What is the frequency response of the speaker that I'm trying to use? How does this work? And finally, I felt like I got to the point where I was recreating what, to my ear, sounded like a realistic amp. We're gonna hop over to the computer, we're gonna take a look at some frequency responses of some various speakers and explain how that translates to getting more realistic amp tones that you can really enjoy. So in the search to, again, get good realistic amp tones, we do need to understand the frequency responses of a guitar cabinet. So I'm taking a look at a Celestian Blue here, and I'm going to pop right over to the frequency response chart, and we're looking at it here. And you can see kind of this even uptick. Obviously we're not dealing with a whole lot of lows. Relatively flat-ish through this kind of low mids into the mids. We have this little dip and bump between 1 and 2K here, and then what happens, we have 5K, 6K, pretty sharp drop off there. We're at 7K here, and then we kind of have this kind of what I would refer to in the guitar world as presence. This is kind of the high end that doesn't exist in spades, but it is there a little bit. Again, or similarly I should say, one of my favorite speakers is a greenback. Okay, this is the frequency response for a greenback. Okay, a little bit more in the low end, a little flatter through the mid-range, but again, you'll see a similar little bump in right around 2K there, and the same steep drop off as we hit 5 and 6K. Smoother top end here, not as much going on in terms of the high end presence in comparison to the Celestian Blue. In the same way, if we go look at a Vintage 30, of course, Vintage 30, pretty popular speaker. If we look at that, again, a little bit different through the lows and mids, pretty flat through here. The dip and spike that we see with the other two is still there, not as significant, but again, we have that same dip right as we hit 5K and 6K. It drops right off, and then we have this level of presence up in this high end. So how does that actually translate to the modeling world? And how does that really, what does it matter? So I'm gonna look at one trend that we saw with all three speakers, and I'm gonna reinforce that frequency or lack thereof in HX Edit here, and we'll see how that changes the tone. I think you guys will be, you'll kind of get an idea of what we have going on. So we're here in HX Edit, and I'm just gonna pull up a stock amp and cab combination. I'm not gonna make a whole lot of adjustments here, but I will start with the high gain amp because you guys can get a better idea, a more clear picture of what's going on when there is a lot of gain. So I'm gonna start with the Cali 4 lead here, straight out of the box. So a lot of gain, of course, but I'm gonna pull up the global EQ here. And what I'm gonna do is take our highs and I'm gonna reinforce that big drop off that we saw between 5 and 6K in our speakers that we were just taking a look at a moment ago. So obviously we can dip this. We have a negative or a 12 dB swing here. I'm gonna start at 7.5K, and I'm gonna bring this Q to about 2, usually 1.5 to 2 will do it. And then I'm gonna bring this to -6, so half of our total available dB swing. And then you can kind of see here we have, again, 5 and 6K here. We're reinforcing that drop off in the high end. So real quick, here's our unaffected tone. Then I'm going to turn on the global EQ. Bring this up to 7.5. So right away between these two, not even making any adjustments to the amp, stock, pull up, just amp and cab combo. That sounds much more realistic to me with that little scoop, or that decent sized scoop here in the highs. Okay, so one other thing we can do is we can use this high cut. I think people get a little too aggressive with this high cut because we're cutting out all the presence. But this is going to be amp specific. Let's just cut it down to 16K really quick here. If we leave that for a second, we can go back to the amp. Let's just say bump the bass a little bit. We can bump the presence a little bit here, just to halfway or so. We turn the EQ off. So to my ear, that sounds way more natural. Still have high end, I still have presence, I still got, obviously there's a ton of gain, but that sounds way more natural again to my ear. So let's look at a couple more examples. Now for our next example, I want to pull up the Panama, this PV Panama. It's like a 5150. It should be a pretty familiar sound for most people. Not too bad out of the box. If we, again, that's EQ bypass. Turn on our global EQ, same settings. Actually what we'll do is we'll turn off the high cut, so all we have is the dip in the high end. off, on. Again, sounds way more realistic to me. Let's max this out here. Let's dip this all the way down to negative 12 dB. So you can hear like it's a little bit extreme, but I still think that sounds sounds pretty good. And that's an extreme setting. Let's keep this right in the middle at 6 dB. Really quickly before I move forward, what we're gonna do is I'm gonna put a parametric EQ block behind our amp here, and we're gonna reproduce this in that parametric EQ block so we don't have to use the global EQ. Reset that, we'll bypass it. I'm gonna go to EQ, parametric, 0, 0, 7, 5, 2, and we'll bump this down to 6. So now you guys are getting an idea of what's going on here. One more example with the high gain stuff. Let's pull up an Uber. We have the Uberschall model here. Now, I've never played an Uberschall, but I have listened to a lot of recordings of it. Now, I'm not sure it sounds like that. Let's turn on our EQ and we'll see the difference. So we have off. Turn the drive down a little bit here. But now even with that EQ change, I can bump the treble here in the presence. Again, I think that just sounds way more realistic, and all we did was basically get rid of frequencies that weren't there, reinforce the frequencies that should be there in a vintage 30. Okay, next, I grabbed a telly. We're gonna look at some more medium gain or kind of breakup tones here. So right up to the top, we're gonna look at the Super O. Let me bypass the EQ here. So here we have the Super O stock pulled up settings here. Not too bad, actually. Let's turn on our EQ. We haven't changed anything here, again, except for that 6 dB cut. What you can do here with this type of EQ shift is obviously you can move this around. So I'm gonna move our cut down to, let's just say 6.5. You guys can hear that. I'll play and bring it up. So I put 7.5 in there as kind of a midpoint. You could bring that down into the frequency range. You could take it up into the frequency range. It's also a reason that I like to, instead of using the global EQ, have a parametric EQ in each patch so that you can kind of match the amp tones, or you can match your frequency cuts to the amp tones that you're trying to get. You're not stuck to one EQ change using the global EQ. Just my 2 cents. Again, turn that off. Just a lot of upper frequencies that, again, my ear's not used to hearing. Again, I much prefer the sound of the EQ. Let's take a look at the next one here. We're gonna pull up the Voltage Queen. Again, stock settings here. We'll turn the EQ off. Kind of reminds me of a tweed, but pretty aggressive in that upper range there, kind of pretty aggressive in the high end. Again, haven't touched. I'll pull up EQ here. Same settings. On again. Now, of course, you can adjust the amount of cut that's happening based on what you're hearing. So, like in this case, it's maintaining some of that aggressive high end. It doesn't kill the character of the amp, but it is kind of taking stuff out that I don't want to hear. Really quickly, let's look at one more kind of medium gain. We'll pull up, again, these are stock settings, not tweaking anything. You guys are seeing this real time. Let's go to this matchless here. I think what's interesting about this one is that the cut is up quite a bit and the presence is down. So if we bring those to the middle, not a bad sound, but let's turn on our EQ. Turn on the EQ here. We can bring the cut down and the presence up, tone up a little bit, master down. Turn the EQ off again. This matchless, the channel 2, actually sounds really good out of the box. So, but you can see how even a little bit of cut here and there changes can have some benefit. So again, you can just take a couple dB wherever you want, and I think it lends itself to a more realistic amp tone. Next, I want to take a look at some clean examples here. So I have the US Deluxe Normal stock settings. I just turn it down a little bit. EQ is off. If I turn the EQ on here, so the differences are not as apparent with our clean tones, but I want to hit this with the tube screamer, and you guys will see kind of what I'm talking about. And here's our tube screamer on, our EQ is off. EQ off. Hopefully you're starting to see a trend here. A lot of the digital modelers and such seem to reproduce frequencies that don't really exist in real life. So, although this doesn't really sound bad, it doesn't really sound like a tube screamer. Where if I chop out the frequencies that shouldn't be there anyway, it sounds more realistic. I'm getting the mid push, and it sounds more like like I would expect it to in my brain. So let's look at another example I'm gonna pull up my main amp patch. It is available for you to download. And I'll show you guys a few examples of how this might apply to like a full pedal board situation. You guys can see here what I'm looking at and kind of what's going on in terms of I just have a gentle cut. I've got a little bit of low end thing going on here in the low mids, and then just 4 dB off again at 7.5K, the high Q of 2. I've got a high cut at 16K here. Here's my clean tone. Oop, just kidding. Here's my clean tone. Cool. And here's the kicker for me. I'm used to using real amps that, using overdrives to kind of boost into them, make them break up, all that. So if I hit it with something like the Plumes, has a lot of the Earthquaker devices. Plumes has a lot of signal, has a lot to push. So let's try that first. Again, my EQ is on here. I'll turn the Plumes on. Sounds good. It sounds good. Sounds like how I would expect it to. If I turn off the EQ, not too bad, but I'm still starting to get some of that high-end ice picky stuff. Not really loving it. I'm going to accentuate that by hitting with the clean boost here, as I typically would for like a big part or a lead or something. 8 dB of clean boost here. Again, I'm starting to get a lot of high-end information that in real life I don't think it exists. Let's turn on the EQ. This is a Plumes with 8 dB clean boost. Now, as you would expect, as you boost into amps, you do get more high end. You do get more of that bite, but with the EQ on, I'm not getting so much fuzz and extra high end. It just sounds more natural. And to illustrate this one more time, what I'm gonna do is with the EQ off, I'm gonna turn on the clean boost. We're gonna about 10 or 12. Let's see. We're gonna go 12 dB of clean boost here. So it's just extra signal into the amp. So we've got 12 dB of clean boost, just extra signal going into my amps, and it'll kind of show you kind of how this works here. So again, not bad, because I've kind of dialed in these amps, I think, pretty good. And Line 6 has gotten a lot better with the cab updates. But if I turn the EQ on, off, the whole thing it just sounds way more realistic. It sounds way more natural. It sounds like what I'm used to hearing with real amps, real cabinets. So I hope this is helpful. I really think that, again, with modelers and everything being so good, being what they are. I hope this takes you from being relatively happy, being satisfied with your amp tones, to really digging your amp tones. I think using an EQ cut like this, again, makes if you're using gained up amps, makes them sound more natural, and it helps your cleaner amps take gain pedals, drives, overdrives, boost in a way that seems much more natural and satisfying to me. And I hope you guys feel the same way. A couple things here just to close. Mess around with the high-end frequency location. So if you feel like you need more high-end, actually bring the EQ center down below 7.5. All of our examples were pretty much right at 7.5 with an EQ with a Q curve of 2, and most of our examples had a gain of -6. Again, that could be maybe a -4. So mess around with your settings and find something that works for you. You can use this also, as I kind of showed it at the very beginning, in conjunction with the high cut. I really don't like taking a high cut all the way down to 7-8K because it cuts out the frequencies that, again, our ears used to hearing in terms of some of those high-end presency things that are really satisfying with guitar tones. So use this in conjunction with a little bit of high cut. I usually don't put the high cut lower than 16K, and that's kind of a newer thing for me too, but those frequencies in that area still do exist, just in a different way. So again, I hope this was helpful. Guys, give this a try. Let me know what you think, and again, my goal is to help you enjoy your amp tones, enjoy making music, enjoy playing music, enjoy serving your church. Let me know if this was useful to you, and stay tuned. Plenty more things to come. Thanks, guys. We'll see you next time.